Welcome to this edition of Down the Right Field Line with Marlins Nation. On this episode, we're going to recap the 2012 season. We're going to start off with the predictions that we made in March, Rob. And, man, it didn't go too well. I mean, tell us more about, we developed a point system that you've used in the past, and tell us more about that.
Well, basically, our predictions were way off. If you could predict the number of wins in March that a team's going to have, you should get 2 points, and then you get 1 point if you predict correctly the position in the standings. Flat out, we both were way off, and a few of you guys commented. I appreciate those comments, pretty much saying that we suck.
Pretty much.
And, the predictions were way off, but that's how predictions are. And, when you make predictions in March of how a team's going to perform throughout the course of 162 games, there's going to be predictions that are off. But I have to say, Raph, there were some big surprises this year. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let me go back for a second here and tell you that, we make these predictions, like you mentioned, I think a little bit based on last season's results. And I think we got caught by that. And so you had surprises in the National League. You had the Washington Nationals winning the division, winning the National League East.
Which was a surprise. But at the same time, if you look at our predictions, we were expecting them to perform a lot better.
No doubt.
So their rotation certainly carried that team. And both of us, if you go back to that episode, both of us talked about the Nationals being a lot better. We weren't sure if they were going to take it to that next level. Nobody would have predicted they were going to finish in first place.
Of course. Nobody would have predicted that. And to a lesser degree, I think Cincinnati, they had a stacked rotation, just like Washington. They had a rotation that made all their starts. And look, lo and behold, they're in first place.
And you did talk about that in that prediction. Although you didn't pick them to win the division, you did talk about the Reds being a big player in that division. And sure enough, they were able to take the division.
So, you had those surprises, and then you had disappointments. And there's no secret. We're not going to sugarcoat it. The Marlins were a disappointment, huge disappointment in the National League. We thought, if not a shoo-in in the wild card playoff, at least over 500, and nothing of that nature happened. Finished in last place in the National League East, and that's a disappointment. And also in Colorado, I personally thought that Colorado was going to do something, and they ended up finishing in last place as well. So as far as my wild card predictions were concerned, I was way off. But you weren't that far off in terms of some teams that might have had success.
Well, I was predicting that the Dodgers were going to be a lot better, and I actually mentioned in that episode that once the ownership kind of thing was squared away, that I thought that the ownership would step up and say, okay, we're going to make some moves. I didn't know who the ownership was going to be at that point, but I kind of had that feeling. And sure enough, the Dodgers did obviously made a ton of moves, and more moves to come this offseason, so you guys know. And they were really active, and that's why they were able to get up in the standings, although they didn't finish in first place. They did make a small little run at the end. And then the Giants. I think both of us talked about the Giants in that episode, but we were both saying, it just depends on where their offense comes from. And flat out, the Giants really, to this day, I mean, they're in the playoffs, but they don't have a ridiculous offense, but their pitching is enough to get them over the top.
Their main source of offense is now on a suspension. From the beginning of the season, Melky Cabrera came out of nowhere with his batting stats, and now he's caught with performance-enhancing drugs, and he's no longer on the roster, on the active roster. So, like you said, to your point, where, we're back to square one. We don't know where that offense is coming from. They've made key additions in Hunter Pence and Marco Scutaro, but it's still, they're not those main source of guys. I think you go back to a Buster Posey and Pablo Sandoval, and even then, that team just finds a way to win. And given the struggles of Tim Lincecum as well, you still don't know. Brian Wilson out for the season with Tommy John surgery. Keep adding names, keep adding difficulties, and yet they still find a way to win. And as far as the Pittsburgh Pirates are concerned, we both thought, okay, this is the year that at least they make advancements, and they did make advancements, but they did take a big step backwards in the sense that they were primed to get that wild card spot, Rob, and they just, they couldn't complete the feat, I guess. Given what they did last year, same thing, they collapsed after a certain amount of time.
I think the biggest thing this year is that Andrew McCutchen has put himself as an elite player. He has taken that leap from being borderline, about to break out, to now being an elite player. And if they build a ball club around him, you can see them competing, especially now that the Astros are going to be out of the division. Now it's going to be a 5-team race. It's going to be a lot more competitive, and I just see them, moving forward. Now, we did predict that they would at least finish 500 and end that streak of losing seasons, which they didn't. But like you mentioned, they definitely made a step forward, and I think Clint Hurdle was a big reason why.
Oh, no doubt. A team that we thought was going to win, landslide, no doubt about it, the Detroit Tigers.
Right.
And lo and behold, did you see this coming, where the Tigers were battling for that first place spot within the last 2 weeks of the regular season? You had the White Sox of all teams in first place for a long time in that Central, and the Tigers did end up coming from behind and winning it. So we got it right, but not exactly the way we envisioned it.
Yeah, it was one of those things where the division just was not going to let them get it easily, and the White Sox made a huge run, and more power to them. I didn't think, in Robin Ventura's first year as manager, I didn't think he was going to be that good.
Not at all.
But, they were able to get out there. There were some guys that stepped up in that team, a bunch of rookies also. And, that's the way you win ball games. You have guys you bring up from the minors, and all of a sudden they step into a role. Look at the 2003 team with Miguel Cabrera coming out of nowhere. So, you put together a team and just, I guess sometimes you just kind of hope that they start performing. And sure enough, they did. I mean, look at the A's. That was probably going to be our next topic. The A's, their whole rotation is rookies. So you have guys that come out and they just perform. The 2006 Marlins, we had a good rotation, and there were a bunch of rookies, except Don Trout, of course.
Right.
But that's how you take teams to the next level. Guys come in from the minor leagues and they just start performing right away. That's what the A's did. And can you believe, when we were talking in the offseason, it was Rangers, Angels, they're going to battle it out. It's going to be hardcore. We would have never thought the last game of the season was going to be Rangers, Oakland battling for that division. That was the furthest thing from our mind.
My goodness.
We knew the Mariners were going to finish in last place.
Right.
But we would have never thought Oakland was going to be battling first place.
You have to be some sort of Nostradamus person to figure that one out. And also in the American League East, we both predicted the Yankees would win the division, and that they did. But we never thought Baltimore would claim that wild card spot. And you go back a year before that, we had thought, okay, Baltimore's going to have a good year, and they didn't.
And they
so we're like, all right, well, if they didn't do it then, they're not going to do it now. But who would have known another year of Buck Showalter in Baltimore would have landed them a wild card spot. And man, did they surprise the American League, and I think all of baseball, to be honest with you, with a young pitching staff, a bunch of nobodies pretty much. The lineup was stacked, I think. Similar to an Oakland thing where you pick up pieces here and there, like a Robert Andino, like a Chris Davis, and players like that, and all of a sudden you are in a playoff spot. So it was great to see Baltimore finally break that streak of consecutive losing seasons since 1997, where they last made the playoffs that year. So it was great to see that.
That's another case where you have Andrew McCutchen going to the next level, and you had Adam Jones kind of carrying that ball club. And in that division, you always have kind of a sense that, maybe one of these teams, like Blue Jays a couple years ago, they performed really well. And you say, maybe the Blue Jays have taken it next level. And then they took a step back. Look at the Red Sox. The Red Sox, they were an elite team for a long time. I can't even remember the last time the Red Sox were that far down in the division. And, they struggle automatically. The Orioles take control. And that's going to make that division a whole lot more interesting next year because you're going to have the Yankees with their issues. You're going to have the Red Sox with their issues. The Rays are always good, and that was one big surprise for me. The Orioles finishing that far up, although it was kind of a surprise, the biggest surprise for me was that the Rays weren't that far up in the division, and then the Red Sox obviously in last. But it's a good thing that the Orioles are stepping up. It excites their fans, just like in Washington. I love when underdogs like that, they get their fans going, and then all of a sudden, year after year, they can start filling up that stadium.
Definitely, and whether that influences our predictions for next year, I don't know. But I guess we're going to try to be better at this. We're going to try to predict a better scenario for you guys, and hopefully we're right.
Well, taking that to the next level, we kind of calculated it. I did win slightly on the predictions, when we tallied it up just by like 2 points. So if you would have picked, there were a couple that you were like 1 win away.
Right.
If you would have gotten those 2 points, it would have been a dead heat tie. But in any case, your prediction for the World Series was Phillies
versus Rangers.
Way
off.
Which is way off. Mine was Phillies Tigers, which is at least one team is still possible that it's going to be there. But in any case, like you said, baseball, 162 games, anything can happen. That's what's the best part about baseball, the fact that you have a season so long that a couple of injuries here and there, and all of a sudden a team slides, or a bad manager, and that would be Valentine's case, and all of a sudden a team slides, and that gives an opportunity to somebody else. In football, you don't really have that. You only have 16 games, and the season pretty much goes the way it's planned in most cases. But no, that's what's the good thing about baseball.
So this season was also full of firsts, I guess, in a sense. First time since 1967, a player has hit for the Triple Crown. Back in 1967, Carl Yastrzemski of the Boston Red Sox did it. And this year, it was our old pal Miguel Cabrera, leading the American League in batting average, home runs, and RBI. And you could have seen this coming, I think. I mean, he's always there in the batting average race. He's actually fell a couple points shy of Freddie Sanchez back when he was back when Cabrera was with the Marlins and Sanchez with the Pirates. So he fell short there that year. So you knew that he had the capabilities. He has led in homers in the past, and he's up there in RBIs year in and year out. So it is no surprise that he has finally reached that plateau. And what better player for it to happen than Miguel Cabrera?
Absolutely. And you had actually predicted him to win the AL MVP, which I still think he should win the MVP. Trout, yeah, he's a great player. Rookie of the Year by far. But I don't think he is the MVP. Cabrera carried his team to the playoffs, especially like we talked about on how they were not performing well, and then they just took off and won the division. That's what an MVP does. He carries his team, and absolutely, he's always going to be there on batting average, and that's what makes him an MVP. When you can hit for power, you can drive guys in. That makes you a huge force to be reckoned with, not only on the fantasy baseball side, but just overall. Because you have a guy that comes up, you know he's going to drive you in. You know he's going to hit the ball the other way. That's the thing about Cabrera. He hits all over the field. So Trout, maybe have a chance next year, but I think Cabrera should win the MVP, and I am so happy for him to have the Triple Crown. We can go back to when we have kids and say, look, we watched Miguel Cabrera hit for the Triple Crown, and that hasn't been done, and maybe that won't ever be done for another 20 years.
Maybe not. And I will say this about Trout, though. Props on him. A rookie coming into the bigs. Your team has just signed Albert Pujols, and you yourself as a rookie has carried that team as far as possible. I think that hands down Rookie of the Year. I don't think there's anybody's going to challenge him. But had Cabrera not hit for the Triple Crown, I think he would have definitely been in consideration for it. The guy has been amazing, both with the speed, the glove, the power, everything, and it's something that you don't rarely see. My hat goes off to you, Trout, and hopefully next year you'll get that MVP award. And before we let you go, we're gonna leave you with, I guess, some postseason picks that we made earlier before the postseason started. Now, mind you, some of these teams have already been eliminated, but we thought we'd like to share it to you, I guess. And for me, my World Series pick had the Oakland A's battling against the San Francisco Giants, so Battle of the Bay there. And Rob, what was your pick?
Well, my picks were way off, and you know that's the thing. When you make these type of predictions, you want to just follow your heart and just go with what you think. You don't want to think too much into it, because you make one pick and you change it, exactly. And all of a sudden you're saying, "God, I shouldn't have changed that." That team ended up winning the World Series.
Exactly.
I ended up picking the Rangers against the Nationals. I thought the Nationals were going to ride that tremendous pitching, and I actually thought that Strasburg was going to come back in the division series. He was going to make a surprise appearance, and why not bring the guy back, especially if you make the championship series. Maybe he would have actually pitched, but obviously I was way off. But you know, we'll see if the Giants make it to a World Series.
Well, that does it for this episode. Please make sure to keep in touch with us as the postseason wraps up, and also keep in touch with us as we go over, or as Major League Baseball goes through this offseason. It's a little hot stove talk, and see where talks of A-Rod leaving the Yankees. But for that, you got to stick tuned to us. And from all of us here down the RF line, we'd like to leave you with our random video of the week, which you like to call
The Major Freak Out.
Later.
Wow!